Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni. I use the emotion code, the body code, and the belief code, helping people suffering from chronic pain, chronic illness, or unexplained medical conditions to heal or reduce their symptoms. This podcast supports this message of natural alternative healing, and it hopes to bring some message to those who needs to hear the messages. Let's get started. Today in the studio with me, Marvin Berman. Marvin, so lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Anna. Great to be here.
Wonderful. So let us get started. What? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm uh, happily a New Jersey resident for about the last 8 months. I decided to follow the grandchildren, which is seemingly a thing that a lot of grandparents end up doing as their children move about. So we moved from Pennsylvania to New Jersey, and I've reestablished Quiet Mind Foundation here in New Jersey. And Quiet Mind, I started that about 20 years ago as a way to address the need for more research on the use of non-drug, non-invasive treatment options for neurodegenerative, neuropsychiatric, and neurodevelopmental disorders. Because, like many people, my parents and my grandparents started to show signs of dementia. I started looking because I had trained in psychology and in body-centered psychology. So I was very aware and focused on the mind-body connection. And so when I saw what was happening with my mom and my grandmother, I started looking in the literature about what happens to people's brains, when they develop memory problems. And I saw that neurology had been doing study after study after study showing that the EEG, the brain electrical activity, has very specific patterns in terms of what goes wrong as people progress in dementia. And when we talk about brain waves, they have different frequencies of brain waves, the delta, the theta, they're going from slow to fast. So what they showed again and again and again was that as people progressed in dementia or psychiatric illness or autism, that there was a very specific pattern of increasing activity in the slower frequencies and decreasing activity in the faster frequencies. Okay, so then I started looking. Okay, so now that you know that, what did you do about it? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on here? Then I realized, wait, they would only be interested in giving somebody a drug. Well, what kind of drug are you going to give to change that? No. But the people in the biofeedback world called behavioral medicine, they had been doing research and publishing for 40, now 50 years on the use of brainwave biofeedback training as a way to modify the electrical activity in the brain. And they were using it specifically to focus on things like epilepsy. Well, wouldn't the neurologists be interested in the fact that you could do biofeedback and reduce or eliminate epileptic seizures? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I realized that how many neurologists are reading the Journal of Neurofeedback? How many behavioral medicine researchers are publishing their research in the American Journal of Neurology? What's wrong with this picture?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, oh, nobody knows what they're doing. They don't know. So that's when we started doing research and showed that if you train someone with dementia or Parkinson's or traumatic brain injury, right? If you train them to decrease the amplitude or the voltage of the slow frequency, and you train them to train up the fast frequency, guess what? They get better.
Mm-hmm.
What we found was that their memory scores and their other scores did in fact improve. However, they didn't stay better
Mm-hmm.
because what we were doing was changing the slope of decline from this to that. But what we weren't doing was undoing the underlying neurodegenerative process that was still going on. That's when I started finding out about the near infrared light. And the fact that my colleague now, Paul Chazot, who's the chairman of pharmacology at Durham University in the UK, he had been doing basic research on infrared light and its effects on neuron development and growth and survival and resilience. Well, it turns out that they were doing research on mice that were pre-developed to develop dementia or plaque. And then they shined the light on the mice, and they showed that the mice that got the real 1070 nanometer light significantly improved in their memory scores and stayed better as long as they were getting the light treatment. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. There it is. You do the light to correct the underlying biological problem, and you do the neurofeedback to correct the dysregulated connectivity. Now you've got a solution. Now, that left out the third leg of the stool. The third leg of the stool is the issue of inflammation and dealing with toxicity and inflammation in the system that comes from things like in New Jersey and in the East Coast, certainly Lyme disease and mold toxicity. And so once we started realizing that you have to address the functional issues of toxicity and inflammation, then add the photobiomodulation to improve the overall capacity of the system to recover, and then correct the dysregulated connectivity in the brain, now you've got the makings of a more comprehensive solution.
Amazing.
So that's what we've been up to since 2009.
Right. So tell me something. People out in the street believe that conditions like dementia, Parkinson's, all of that is basically irrecoverable, right? That's the man on the street. That's the.
Hopefully, that's starting to change.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to get there in a minute.
Hopefully, this is part of that changing.
Exactly. So that is part of the question that the word on the street, or what the people that I come across. There is that belief that if you're being diagnosed, then this is it. That there's nothing that you can do. Maybe there will be some tricks and stuff like that to prolong it or to keep you going for a while. But the idea is that you won't be able to change it. I'm just reporting back from the street.
Oh yeah.
Right, but then we start having conversations with some people, and they say, actually, no, you can train the brain. You can start doing things differently.
Right.
And I guess that this is exactly where you started with, right? So just before we continue, tell me, what is that kind of training? Is it like when we say, neuroplasticity, right? That we can train the brain to do things, and slowly we will learn.
Most people have heard of the term biofeedback.
Okay.
And what that means is that you are using some kind of device, like a thermometer, right? Mm-hmm. The digital thermometer. You're using a device that's giving you information about your body, about some physiological function. Now you can use the phone to put your finger on the camera, and you can measure pulse oxygenation, you can measure heart rate, things like that. So that's using a device to get feedback about what's going on in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's biofeedback. And by using that information that you're getting, you can develop some level of instrumental control over whatever that function is. So with skin temperature, for example, it's called thermal biofeedback. So if you're holding the thermometer and you start a stopwatch and you time, how long does it take for the thermometer to go from whatever it is when you take it to 95. How long does that take? So now every day you get a hold of the thermometer, start the stopwatch, and you think about your hand getting warmer. In maybe a week or 2 weeks, what you'll notice is that the time it's taking to get to 95 is going down. What that means is that you're developing some level of control over your entire, vascular system, your peripheral vascular system. That's thermal biofeedback. You can do the same thing with the brain electrical activity by measuring the EEG. So putting a sensor on your scalp, you can measure the amount of electricity coming from your brain that reaches the surface of your scalp. There's a normative database of those kind of measurements at 19 different locations on your head, right? And it's an international standard. So there's a normative database that says, this is what the normal amount of voltage should look like in a 73-year-old male who's left-handed. Over here, and over here, and over here. So we can then compare my readings of electricity against the norms of guys who are left-handed or in the database. So we can see, am I above or below the mean, the average? We can then set up a training program, like any other training program, so that I would get rewarded with something every time I changed my brainwave activity toward normal. So what the program that we use in our home training is that you can look at anything you want on the screen, but as soon as your brain activity goes outside of the zone that we've set up, the brightness and the volume of what you're looking at instantly drops by 75%. As soon as you come back into the zone that we want, you get full brightness and volume. So the reward is taken away from you when you're not doing what we want, and it's given back to you when you do. That's it.
Fascinating.
So if you do that over and over and over again, just like when you train the dog by saying sit and giving it a treat when it did it, you weren't teaching the dog how to speak English. It doesn't understand words, but it does understand that noise. And if it does this other thing, it'll get a reward. Well, it's the same thing with us.
Right. So how do we move that? How do we move forward from that? So here you are, the man with the solution, or a lot of research and a lot of understanding. How do we start changing the perception in the street? And how do we help people see that actually we can change these things?
Well, I've been doing this for 17 years, 18 years now. I helped start a company called Neuronic, which is based in Europe. And they are manufacturing a device. There we go. They're manufacturing this device, which is a 1070 nanometer transcranial photobiomodulation device. And for the last 3 years, we've been marketing that device to people to use with consultation. If they have a diagnosis, we strongly suggest that they get consultation from a professional like me or one of the other people. And now I'm doing the consultation under the Quiet Mind Foundation. So I've stepped back from Neuronic, and I'm doing the consultation with people using the Neuradiant, but I'm doing it under the Quiet Mind Foundation so that people can they can pay for it by making a donation to the Quiet Mind Foundation, because I'm generating revenue so that we can afford to do more research. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is generate more research, publish those findings, get people in the field who are doctors in the field to recognize that this is a real option. And it's coming. I mean, people are starting to recognize the number of publications in photobiomodulation has gone up significantly in the last 5 years, very significantly. So the traditional, neurological field and neuropsychological and neurophysiological field, all of those people are starting to really pay attention to this, and clinicians are starting to pay attention. Harvard now has its own photomedicine clinic at Mass General Hospital. Shepherd University has a photomedicine clinic. We're setting up a neuroscience laboratory at North Central University in Minnesota. I mean, it's happening, but it's really going to take, that process is going to take years. It's already taken years. So really it's up to the people to decide to take matters into their own hands, get the technology, work with a qualified clinician who knows how to do this, and work on putting the pieces together. The one thing that I made sure that Neuronic was doing was creating a policy where if people didn't get benefit in the first 3 months of using the device with consultation, that they could return the device and they would get 80% of their money back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a big expense to try it out. I can tell you that I sleep pretty well at night because I know that in the 2.5 to 3 years that I've been involved, I was involved with Neuronic directly and providing consultation. The percentage of people who purchased the device who then returned it because they weren't getting benefit was somewhere around 2%.
Yeah.
So we know that it's helpful. Now the question is no longer whether it works; it's how do we make it work better?
Right.
Right? How do we improve the ability for it to do what we know it can already do?
So let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
First of all, I guess I want to know, does this device or idea, is that working for anyone with any stage of the diagnosis, or do we really need to get people early on?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think the answer that I almost always give to people is time is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner you start doing something about this, the better the results can be. That's common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Aligning your expectations with where you're starting from is another important point. So I just was on the phone with somebody 20 minutes before we got on the call, and the question he asked me was, my wife maybe has a few more months. I maybe a little longer, I think, but she's seriously compromised. What can I expect? And I said, I don't know what you can expect, but we certainly are able to see improvement in people who are in any stage of the disorder. It's just we don't know how much. And so I've seen people who were at the point where hospice was being called in. They weren't eating, they weren't continent, they weren't talking, they weren't engaging at all. And the wife, this wife got the unit, started using it, and 3 days later she called me and said, he said he was hungry. And I was like, okay. She said, no. He hasn't said anything in months, and now he just said he's hungry. I said, well, yeah, this is what can happen. It really can happen. So how much we can alter the slope is one thing. How far we can reverse the process, that's something else again.
Right. And the reversing of all of that, that's something that is still under research. You're still checking that out.
That's why, yeah, there's a lot more questions than answers, certainly at this point.
Yeah.
But
and so do I understand?
Whether it works isn't really much of a question anymore.
No, I understand that. But do I understand now correctly that we're saying that someone that has been diagnosed with, for example, dementia, and they get this helmet
that
you showed us?
The gizmo.
The gizmo, yes. Do we say that they will need to wear it forever, or is it?
Absolutely. Yeah. The other question is, well, when can I stop using it? And I said, when they call the undertaker.
Okay.
But I mean, my other kind of cute answer is, it's a vitamin. It's not an antibiotic, right? It's the
Yeah.
sun, it's sunlight being absorbed by the mitochondria in the brain. It's
Yeah.
that particular part of the sun wavelength, all of the wavelengths of the sun. It's that particular band of wavelengths that's 85% of the reason there's life on Earth. Really. I mean, near infrared light is the reason there's life on Earth.
Yeah.
For plants,
I
for plants and people. We
yeah.
basically have our own version of photosynthesis going on.
Yes, I'm remembering some things from my biology, I guess, lessons.
It's all about mitochondria.
But tell me,
Yeah, there's one other thing. The mitochondria is very important, but the other part is the blood flow. I mean, the two, when you boil down neurodegeneration to its basic issues, the basic components, it's inflammation and blood flow. So increased inflammation and decreased blood flow. The decreasing blood flow is because of the narrowness of the microvasculature and the inflexibility of the blood vessels. The infrared light literally increases the flexibility of the blood vessels and can increase it by 20 microns, which is a lot in little blood vessel land. So more blood gets through, more blood, more oxygen, longer survival.
And why is it important for us to talk about molds and other toxicity like that?
Mold,
Yeah.
increasing inflammation, decreasing blood flow, increasing toxicity. Same with Lyme disease and all the co-infections.
Right.
These are systemic disorders, systemic diseases that are robbing the body of energy. Plain and simple. So if your body is being robbed of energy, then you don't have the resources to be able to heal.
And neurodegenerative diseases, that's an important part of that.
Yeah. So I mean, something like this is literally putting gas back in the tank. That's what we talk about. I talk about the continuous stimulation from the helmet is literally like putting gas back in the tank. Then when we start pulsing the light at the different locations, because one of the unique things about this device was that you could segment the delivery of the light differently, front, back, left, and right. So we could use the quantitative EEG brain mapping and then determine what kind of stimulation we need over here that's different than over here, that's different over here, right? And we can then create individualized protocols for that person at that time. And we can modify the protocols over time by continually monitoring their progress using the EEG.
Right. So the gizmo is customized. It's basically per person.
Absolutely. I mean, there's basic stuff like decrease inflammation, increase blood flow, but then it's what particular patterns of activity are causing memory loss or loss of faces and names, loss of mathematical versus logical steps, knowing how to do things in sequence, but forgetting people's names, forgetting what you had for breakfast, but remembering who your kindergarten teacher was, those kind of things.
Right. So then basically someone will come to you and then you will wire them up, understand where the deficiencies or the challenges, and then the gizmo knows what to correct and how to.
Yeah, that's it. But you said something important. The idea of coming to me, I really see that that's something that needed to be eliminated, because there are 350 million people who need what we're talking about right now today. Right? Today, there's 350 million people who need this. If you take everybody with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's or dementia, and traumatic brain injury, it's 150 million people worldwide. If you add to that the percentage of people, say it's 15 the research has been somewhere between 15 and 30% of people who've had COVID, regardless of severity. If you've had COVID, somewhere between 15 and 30% are going to develop some degree of neurological injury. That's another 200 million people. So there's 350 million people who could benefit from what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The idea of going somewhere and seeing somebody in order to get treatment makes no sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
So everything we've designed is really about you doing it for yourself at home with this kind of consultation. Or if you can see somebody face to face, that's great. But if not, we could do this and proceed with the entire process of treatment. Both the photobiomodulation and the neurofeedback all needs to be done in your living room.
So it's basically off the shelf.
And getting people the QEEG by sending them to somebody who can do that near them.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's all we need. Because
Yeah.
they can get blood work and they can do all that other stuff if they want. But what we're going to use is the QEEG and the intake information that we can get from an interview. But beyond that, this is really something that people need to do themselves, I think, given the enormity of the problem.
Yeah.
The expense. I mean, it's just, prohibitively expensive if you're trying to do this, in somebody's office.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So tell me what surprised you about the research when you part of the research that was developing all of this?
Well, I'm certainly pleased to see that there are people paying attention to the brain and the gut and the relationship between the gut microbiome and the brain, and working with people to understand that their diet and their nutrition has direct effects on their brain function. That other people are starting to pay attention to the fact that early childhood trauma has long-term impacts on physical health and wellness, and that helping people to resolve through psychotherapy and other kinds of treatment, helping them to resolve those early childhood experiences that were painful and traumatizing, that those things need to be processed in a way that helps people to let them go and heal and regain their ability to experience pleasure and gratitude and be able to feel that fully in their body and experience their full measure of their emotions. That's extremely important in terms of their overall systemic health and longevity. So those are things that are extremely gratifying to see. And, I know that there's going to be more of that as people progress, and that as devices are now coming onto the market, there's one called the SaraThrive that my colleague Sarah Turner has been developing. And that's going to be a remarkably useful device for healing the gut microbiome at the same time as providing photobiomodulation to the brain. These are all great steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in my work, it's definitely understanding, from my point of view, is really understanding the emotional root cause behind, chronic pain, chronic illnesses, and all of that. And so the conversation is very important. I definitely see people that, when I say that to them, they very much say, no, that's not. Maybe it's true for everyone else, but for me, it's not, because, and people believe that, and that's okay. That's, that's their journey.
Well,
But
I trained as a bioenergetic therapist, which means that I was oriented toward the work of Wilhelm Reich and Alexander. Okay. Well, it was Freud, Jung, Adler, and Reich. Wilhelm Reich was one of the first major thinkers in the field of psychoanalysis. But what Reich showed in his research in 1926 was that people who had hysterical paralysis, the people who were frozen, that when they reconnected to the early trauma that caused them to freeze up, when they experienced that traumatic event in psychoanalysis and they cried or expressed their feelings, what he did was put a voltmeter on their shoulders, on their muscles here. And he showed that before they had the awareness, the insight, the voltage was like this. But as soon as they had the insight and they expressed their emotions, the voltage went up.
Mm.
And so he was showing that the experience of psychological insight was directly related to a change in biophysical state, that the muscular tension and the electrical connectivity significantly changed when people became aware and released and reconnected with their trauma and could release that in the therapy. And that began a whole process of understanding how mind and body really work together. And so since 1926, it's been empirically shown that that's how we work, that our mind and body are directly related, and that psychological trauma causes physical suppression, and emotional suppression causes electrical and neuroelectrical changes in the brain directly.
Yes.
It's not, it's not a debatable point anymore. It's not somebody's opinion. He measured it with a voltmeter in 1926, and I've measured it with the EEG, many, many years, looking at the range and variability of the dominant frequency in the EEG, and it's all right there.
It's all there.
Yeah.
So tell me, what next for you said, now you want to try and make the device, the gizmo, but make it better.
The next step is to put the EEG in the helmet. Okay. So when we have the 19 electrodes in the helmet, and we can now measure, when you put on the helmet, you can immediately start to measure the brainwave activity. And we'll have either an ear clip or something on the Apple Watch or something like that measures heart rate variability, which is the amount of time in between heartbeats. So if you measure the heart rate variability and the EEG and you put them together in the cloud, you can then build an algorithm that will individually control all of the different parts, the 19 different parts of the helmet, so that we can then deliver the light to the brain at the locations that the real-time EEG and heart rate variability is saying it's needed. And we can do that in real time for each person.
That is amazing. The real time is...
That's what we want to, that's what's called a closed loop feedback system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we want is a closed loop so that the measurement of the physiological activity is driving the therapeutic intervention in real time, and that the result of the intervention, the treatment, is now going into figuring out what the next treatment is going to be, what the next intervention, and next, and next, and next, and next, so that we're driving all of the scores, all of the measurements toward normal in real time.
Yeah. So this is it's becoming smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a smart intervention. Yes.
Yeah. And so at the moment, what is it like? How often do you go there to?
We're using, there's two answers to that. One is the quantitative EEG. We usually do it every couple of months. Mm-hmm. So we can be guided along the path. Now, if someone is doing the biofeedback, the neurofeedback, while they're using the helmet, while they're using the Neuradiant, well, now we have the data of every single session that they're doing, and we can then trend and we can measure and track how somebody's progress is going session by session by session. Mm-hmm. Right? It's still not the same as real time, but it's getting us closer to being able to see how is everything changing, and is it going in the right direction, or does something need to change? And then we measure every 10 or 20 sessions that someone's doing. We'll get all that data. We'll do a quick measurement. we'll send back a chart. Here's how you're doing for the last 2 weeks. Oh, what happened last week when things went bad on last Wednesday? Oh, my cat got sick. Oh, okay. And now we keep going. But we can modify the protocol if they're doing the neurofeedback right away over the internet. We can change the protocol in right then and there.
So I'm a little bit curious. I know that dementia and Parkinson's, of course, there's different stages for the diseases or the illness to take part. But the things that you are describing, some of them feel like the more maybe earlier on, when people still have, still have clarity, still have, some of the ability to communicate. And
well, I would hope that people would start thinking about this as a way to do prevention, because that's really what we're talking about, right? We can say that this kind of treatment can be preventative because there's publications of research using the same transcranial photobiomodulation. This is the original research device. This is what people usually know. This is the original research device called the Cognitolite. This device was used in a study of people with early to mid-stage Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. It was also used in a study with normal subjects who didn't have any problems with memory or otherwise. And what they found was that the normal subjects improved their functioning about the same degree as the people with Alzheimer's improved.
Mm-hmm.
So people in the clinical population improved, people in the normal population also improved. Therefore, we can say this is a preventative intervention.
Yeah. So the people that are more advanced, the more advanced in the conditions, and they're using this gizmo, then
they can expect to improve. And certainly in terms of mood stability, in terms of sundowning, in terms of anxiety, the lability of affect, where people go from okay to all of a sudden crying and being upset and then back, and that whole all of those kind of things can be seen to improve. But also, like the gentleman who was severely compromised, all of a sudden came back and started saying, "Hey, I'm hungry."
Mm-hmm.
So it so much depends. I know it so much depends on understanding what the root cause of the problem is. Just because you say you have dementia just means that your memory is getting lousy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't tell you what's really the root cause of the problem at all. So you really need to do a root cause analysis, and that's what people like Dr. Bredesen, Dr. Hathaway, Dr. Hazy, the people involved in the RECODE program who are doing the research on understanding the underlying systemic causes of the problem. Those are the kind of analyses that need to be done. Our functional medicine doctor is Dr. Anil Bajnath, and he's in Maryland, and he's doing very advanced kind of blood work and lipid protein analysis and plasmalogen analysis. Looking at what the real underlying cellular problems are and the infections and inflammatory processes, what's actually going on that's causing this dysregulation. The QEEG can show that on a neuroelectrical level, but it's not going to tell you which peptides, you know what I mean? It's not going to tell you which cell therapy you need. That's a different level of analysis. But it's critically important so that you know how to address the underlying inflammation and underlying pathology. That's really important to know how to direct treatment.
And this finding the root cause, is that something that is available to everyone? Or is that something that anyone knows?
I wish it's not covered by insurance in most cases, so it's really out of pocket. And that's, the sad fact of this is, that it's really people who can afford to get the treatment that can get the treatment. And one of the reasons why I came back to Quiet Mind Foundation and was focusing back on the foundation research and consultation is that we need to raise money. We need to raise funds that we can direct toward not only doing the research, but also helping provide people with the treatment that they need, regardless of their ability to pay. And so we need to fundraise on that level as well. And that's one of the reasons why, Quiet Mind's a 501c3 nonprofit, and we take donations from people who get better and who see their husbands and wives getting better, and companies that really see that this is important work to be done, that's and grants that we can apply for. We're always looking for ways to raise funds so that we can continue this kind of work, which shouldn't surprise anybody.
Yeah.
It's not covered by insurance, and NIH is not quite at the point where it's giving money out in large amounts to non-traditional alternative approaches. However, the National Institute on Aging, to their credit, has split their funding streams into the pharmacological and the non-pharmacological research streams. So there's now two approaches to getting funding from the National Institute on Aging, and I think that was brilliant on their part.
Absolutely. So, Marvin, tell me, we're getting towards the end of our conversation, but tell me, what are 1, 2, 3 messages that you'd like anyone listening to take away from today's conversation?
Having a diagnosis of neurodegeneration used to be what the reaction to neurodegenerative diseases now is what people reacted to when they were told they had cancer 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now people who are told they have cancer, they know that there's options, and they know that there's treatment, and they know that there's stuff that they can do. I hope people can listen to what we're talking about and really get that they can have a sense of hope that there are things you can do to improve your condition and help the loved ones that you're trying to help significantly, right? I don't think we can say the word cure yet, right? I don't think we can do that. That wouldn't be appropriate. But I think we can say we can make a significant difference. And definitely the sooner you get to know that you're in that track, you're heading toward a level of neurodegeneration that could bring on symptoms of dementia, the sooner you know that, the better. And now we're seeing tests that can be done that are non-invasive that can give you an idea of your heading in the right or wrong direction 10 to 15 years before you start to see symptoms. Just getting a picture of your retina, the optical computerized tomography, right, with one of those little things in the eye doctor's office. I mean, you can evaluate the plaque, the amyloid plaque in the retina just from the picture, and you can predict onset of symptoms 10 to 15 years ahead. So you can start to do things to prevent it. There's now blood tests. There's all kinds of things that are happening that can give people significant amount of lead time, so they can really do something to prevent the problem, and to have hope, and to understand that the more you do things to improve your wellness, the more you can change your diet, the more you can get exercise, the more you can resolve your early childhood trauma and find joy and gratitude in your life. I mean, those are the things that are going to make a difference. And working with you on that level, and working with these kinds of technologies, I think is a brilliant combination. I really hope people take this idea of putting them together seriously.
Yeah,
I look forward to us working together on that. I really do. It's got to come from people like us, clinicians and healers and people in the research field working together to really promote this idea that there is something you can do. Really, no kidding.
This is exactly what this podcast is all about. I really want to bring forward this message that, it's not all doom and gloom. Actually, it's probably the opposite. Okay, you got the diagnosis. Now let's talk about it. Let's find the natural alternative ways to get better. And there are so many ways to get better. So this is definitely the kind of conversations I'm very interested in.
Well, I'll be happy to come back. And if if people who are listening to the podcast want to send in questions, and maybe we want to do like a question and answer, I'd be happy to do that.
Yes, absolutely. We just need to sort out the Facebook limitations.
Oh,
I,
yeah, right.
I
Don't
know
look to me for
technology.
that.
I
I
have
know.
one question. One question before we say goodbye.
Okay.
Actually, I have two questions. If people use your gizmo, your solution, is it okay for? Because I know that people, when they get diagnosed, they really get confused and like, okay, now I'm going to start doing research and now I'm going to find all of these different answers and all of these different solutions. How do I know which one is the right one for me?
That brings me to my other pet peeve about the healthcare system. It's like, how is it that the the patient has become the clinical quarterback?
Mm,
In what universe does that make any sense at all? How
yeah,
is it that the patient is now the person who's supposed to figure out what the treatment plan is supposed to, like, what? So I think our role, part of my role has been to help people figure out what the plan could be, doing a consultation and evaluating what's out there, what's going on with you, and then what makes the most sense for a treatment plan given the amount of time, the amount of energy, and the amount of resources that you have to put toward it.
yeah.
And I think I think the clinicians need to start providing that level of consultation that's strategic before it's therapeutic.
I guess that's the
That's what I think we need to, and take
yeah.
the role of clinical quarterback back into the relationship between the clinician and the client.
This is more difficult, right? Because many of the doctors that people tell me about, they never heard about the mind body connection.
15 minutes, 15 minutes, 50. I got another person with 15 minutes. Sorry. Yeah, you can't do that. It can't be like that.
Yeah. So tell me, before we say goodbye, there is an offer that you wanted to make to anyone who purchased the.
Certainly, the people who are ordering the device from the consultation, the initial consultation that I would do would be at no cost.
Mhm.
So if people are ordering the device, the Neuradiant, or they're ordering the home neurofeedback, the initial consultation for that process will be at no cost. So that's a $250 saving.
Nice.
All right.
Nice.
But we're going to work with people. Well, there's the other thing that people can do, is, because we're a nonprofit, people can donate to the foundation, and the foundation can give them a donation letter for the amount of the donated amount less the cost of the device.
Mhm.
So in the case of the Neuradiant, they can order the device for $3,500, and then they'll get a letter of donation for $3,000.
Mhm.
Same with the home neurofeedback, it's $2,500, and they can get a $2,000 letter of donation.
Sounds incredible.
Write it off their taxes. Now that's only good for people in the United States, obviously,
Yeah.
but for other people, we're certainly willing to work with people, in terms of their ability. We'll work with people around cost as much as possible, but we can definitely do those things.
Amazing. Well, I really, all of your information, Marvin, would be down in the description of wherever people are finding this conversation. So I
Okay.
definitely encourage people to get in touch, ask questions, have conversations. Yeah, and anyone hearing this conversation, I really hope that if you know someone that needs to hear this, then please pass it on. This is,
And
we have to get these conversations.
the website is quietmindfdn.org. And you can reach me at info at quietmindfdn.org. And I'll be happy to respond.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you so much, Marvin. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.